What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Edwin Choi of Jetfuel, Jetfuel Agency. Before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since we're going to go deep in e-commerce and brands I love, actually, that Edwin and his company has worked with, you can check out the interview I did with one of the founders of RX Bar. That was a really good one. Also, one of the founders of Quest Nutrition. We'll talk about a bar company on here. I won't reveal it yet. Actually, one of my favorite bar companies of all time. But check those out. Also, since this is part of the Top Agency series, there's a few that are interesting. You could check out Kevin Hurrigan of Spinutech, actually had an agency since 1995. So he talks about the landscape of business, the internet, agency life. So that's a really good one to check out. Also, Todd Taskey, also has the Second Bite podcast, and Todd helps pair private equity with agencies. So he helps sell agencies, and he calls it Second Bite because sometimes when those agencies sell, they make more on the second bite than they do on the first. So he actually has people on there telling their story after they've sold. So really fascinating stuff there. Check out more on inspiredinsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. In Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships. And partnerships. How do we do that? We actually do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. And we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content, develop amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. The number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. Happy to answer any questions you have. I'm excited to introduce Edwin Choi. He's the founder and CEO at Jetfuel, Jetfuel.agency. You could find him there. They're a rapidly growing agency, and they specialize in performance marketing for direct-to-consumer brands. They've worked with some of the biggest brands in e-commerce, some of my favorites, including Perfect Bar. I am regularly on a weekly basis buying Perfect Bars. Love them. My kids love them. Also, they've worked with Drunk Elephant. When your email came in and we were corresponding, I mentioned, should I have Edwin on the podcast? And my daughters are like, if he worked with Drunk Elephant, they were begging me to have you on. Okay. And if I didn't have $2, I probably wouldn't know what Drunk Elephant is, but I do. And they work with Goop, and they help drive revenue growth and brand recognition. And Edwin has been involved in direct-to-consumer e-commerce marketing since 2009. And he's helped lead growth at 8-figure companies in-house until he started Jetfuel. So Edwin, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
You have a huge fan club at my house. You didn't even know that.
Well, I didn't know that, but I could take all the fans I can get. So I guess I have at least 2 now. So
talk about Jetfuel Agency and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and if someone's listening to the audio, there will be a video piece, and you'll see, I'm going to pull his website up as he's talking so we can take a look.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jetfuel Agency, I started the agency in 2017. So this is really an extension of myself as a digital marketer. What was the agency that I wanted to work with when I was in-house? So we're a performance digital marketing agency. We specialize in direct-to-consumer brands, mostly in CPG, consumer food and beverage. And what we do is that we focus on our 3 main pillars, which is paid social, paid search, as well as retention marketing, email, SMS, direct mail. And we help sustainably grow our brands and our partners through economies, good and bad. And that is what we do.
Talk about the niche for a second. Why these type of companies? Like when I'm looking at this, I mean, These are some of my favorite companies, actually. Perfect Snacks or Perfect Bar, I consume on a daily, weekly basis. Hip Peas also consume on a weekly basis. I'm not sure how you pronounce the
Noon.
hydration, but that also I consume, and I've had the chocolate chip cookies from Tate's Bake Shop. So, but why did you choose this as a niche? Because there's a lot of options out there.
Well, they always say you should choose brands that you consume. So I am a consumer of better for you brands. I am what you call, I guess, a foodie. I love eating. I love trying out new brands. I love brands that have a great label and a great mission and a great reason to exist. And as a consumer, right, if you're marketing for these brands and you're consuming them yourself, then you obviously understand the customer a little better. You understand the persona a little better. And most importantly of all is fun to market in this space, right? It's fun to see brands on shelf doing well and then help them do equally as well online.
Um, Here's Hippies, by the way. Their Rock and Ranch are amazing, by the way.
Yes,
So
very
I
addictive.
sometimes can't find them in the stores. Same thing with it's because I'm lactose intolerant. So the healthier for you Doritos, I don't know if we want to mention, but the Nacho Vibes and the Rock and Ranch are killer. So
Yes,
love
yes.
it.
And my son loves the chickpea puffs himself, the nacho vibes.
So what about services wise? When you first started the agency, what were the services you offered then compared to now?
Yes. So back then we primarily focused on paid search and paid social, right? We were very much an acquisition shop, right? If you wanted customers to come in through the door, you want a great customer acquisition cost for those customers, we were your agency. But obviously, that's only one piece of building and growing a brand. You also need those customers to stay, and you need them to buy a second time and a third time. And that's when we really introduced the email and SMS services, right? Because we wanted to make sure that, hey, we did all this work to bring in those customers, right? And to convince them to try the brand. We're not just going to let them fall by the wayside. We need to get them to purchase again and again, because that's where brands are really going to get their margin. That's where they're going to get the profit, right? And then now, as we head into 2024, we finally have our SEO services done in such a way where we're getting great results. We did a lot of experimentation in 23, so now we're going to add that to the mix of services, and we have a lot of intent behind the services we offer. We want to make sure that we're world class at something before we offer it. So we're very much a highly specialized agency, and we've always wanted to avoid the jack of all trades, master of none phenomenon.
And that kind of brings me the next question, which is team and hiring. So obviously it started off as just you. What does the evolution of the team look like?
Yeah, over the years, we've been very fortunate to have some amazing leaders come in, right? Our head of operations and our head of design work very closely together to make sure that our creatives and our deliverables are on time, on brand, and they perform. We also have our client strategy supervisor, and she leads our account services team because it's only half the equation, right? You can get amazing performance, but you also need to have killer communication and then killer deliverables in terms of reporting and insights. And then I also want to give a big shout out to our senior media manager as well. And she leads both paid social and paid search. And a lot of what was built here over the last couple of years, definitely hats off to her and all the other leaders at the company. And under them, you have your traditional media buyers, media planners, creative strategists, and all of the important crew that makes everything work.
When you first started your agency, Edwin, what was the first position you hired for?
That is a great question. I'm thinking back. I think the first position I hired for was a paid social media buyer, right? Because I was doing all the media buying myself. I was going into it was called Facebook back then, interface, buying and selling, the products myself. And the workload was just growing tremendously. And I worked pretty hard but there wasn't enough hours in the day to do things at the bar of quality that I wanted. So that was the very first position that I hired for.
What about from a client perspective? When someone starts out on their own, it's not easy. Like you put up your shingle, you go out there. What was the first milestone of a client for you?
The first milestone of a client was I remember quite vividly that we had a client that had just tremendous growth goals, right? They had a bunch of VCs that backed them, and their goals were highly aggressive. I think they wanted to triple every year, right? And they were in a stage of infancy. And I remember this is way back then, but the founder called me late at night and was saying, I don't know how to get here. Like I just don't know how to hit these numbers. And I said, you know what? Like I'm never going to guarantee, but we're going to go down swinging, right? We're going to go down swinging. And lo and behold, that year we did grow 300%, and it was a slog. It was very difficult to hit it, but through the tenacity and grit of the team, we're able to do it. Next year we hit 250% growth. They wanted to repeat 300%, but they were happy with the 250. And that was a huge milestone, because I was always, you have a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? You were in-house, you were doing well, but was that a fluke? Was that something that you could replicate again in your career, again and again and again? And honestly, I didn't know if I could. So that was a big milestone for us.
What were some of the channels and levers you pulled for the 300%?
Absolutely, it was paid search and paid social. On the paid social side, and mind you, this was back in 2017, so an environment's much different. But I remember taking that account and really fleshing out the campaign structure. I think we 11x'd the amount of creative testing that they had. So when they were testing 2 ads before, we were testing 22 ads. We like to call ourselves, at least back in the day, day traders. Right? We wanted to make sure that we always knew where every dollar was going, where every penny was going, because we couldn't afford to waste a single penny, right? And then on the paid search side, same thing. They had just a tremendous SKU catalog, but we weren't hitting on the right SKUs that were bringing people in through the door, right? So we had to restructure their entire campaign to make sure that, hey, if this particular SKU is the one that's bringing in customers to try the brand and have them stick with the brand, that needs to be a VIP SKU. That has to have a significant amount of campaigns, keywords. We have to be ad testing the copy nonstop. And we were just building the house brick by brick. It was not an overnight success story. It was lots of blood and sweat in order to get there. But lo and behold, once you get the snowball rolling, it builds momentum and it picks up.
When you're doing searches online, I'm sure you get a bunch of ads that come across your desk. What are some of the mistakes you see brands and companies making?
Oh, where do I start? I think I'll start with a couple of them, right? So the first one is, where are you landing your customer after they click on the ad? That's one of the biggest mistakes I see. If they see a message on the ad, is where you're landing them congruent to that message, right? And I always tell this to the team internally. Does a scent trail make sense, or are you doing something that throws them off the scent, right? Everything has to be matching the keyword to the creative, to the landing page, to the checkout experience, right? So that would be the first one. Second one is, are you testing enough creative? Because in this day and age, even paid search, you need to be testing creative at a high enough volume for you to truly understand what makes your customers tick, right? Because back in the day, in 2017, there was a lot of targeting options that were available to us. You can get very surgical with targeting. That has all been taken away, right? Because of privacy concerns and other changes in the landscape. So now, how do we make sure that the right people are responding to your campaigns? It is through your creative.
What about, you talk about where you send people. I'm just searching here for protein bars. I'm just seeing what comes up. I see There's a number of brands that will send them to their site. There's brands that will send them to Amazon. There's brands that are sending to Costco. What are your thoughts on Amazon sending direct to Amazon as opposed to a website?
Yeah, well, I would say it depends on your organization's goals and strengths, right? Some brands do tremendously well on Amazon, right? They found the right niche. They have the right talent and the right resources to dominate on Amazon, and obviously it is an enormous market. So it may make sense for them to send that incremental dollar to Amazon, right? Other brands, Amazon is complementary to their strategy, but they would rather keep the customer in their ecosystem, right? They would rather own that customer, know who that person is, be able to speak to them whenever they want and however they want. And if you're that type of brand, then you should be sending your customer to your own site, right? So it's different strengths and different weaknesses. I think the most important thing is, are you measuring the effect between the two? Okay. So I think a lot of brands simply send it to Amazon and they don't think about it any longer, whereas other brands do the same thing with their owned website and their own properties. But perhaps that there is more incrementality sending them to Amazon, or you might get a better lifetime value sending it to your own site. I think those things have to be measured so you can make an educated decision.
Talk about perfect bars. I'm going to pull up the site. You can go to perfectsnacks.com. I'm sure people have seen them. They're every store I've been to, at least. What kind of work did you do with Perfect Bar?
Man, when we started in 2017, we were pretty much all over the place, right? So not only do we manage their paid media, their paid search, paid social, we also rehaul their entire analytics backend so they can track to the nth degree what is happening. We launched and optimized their sub and save functionality and experience. We took over the email and SMS pieces. We grew the list, and this is from memory, so it might be a little fuzzy since it's been since 2017. But I think we grew the list something like 500 or 600% in size. So now they have a strong owned list that they can go ahead and obviously market to and manage. We also developed the website and designed the website, and that went through several iterations. And we've done a lot of testing on the site itself to make sure it can convert very well. So if I could kind of put it all together in a discrete, distinct summary, I think we were sort of their in-house marketing shop, so to speak.
I think it's a family-owned business. Is that right?
It is a family-owned business until it was acquired.
Oh, it was acquired. Okay.
Yeah, it was acquired.
Got it. You mentioned, there's a lot of, and we're looking here at Subscribe and Save website and other things that you had to do. What are some of your favorite e-commerce tools or plugins that you're probably recommending to your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of our favorites right now is a cool tool called No Commerce. So No Commerce is a post-purchase survey, and they have tremendous performance. I am always shocked at how many customers they get to answer this survey. And the data that you get is tremendous, right? Because you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So when you're living in a world where Google and Apple are no longer giving you data, they're no longer accepting cookies, the word of the customer becomes that much more valuable. So if they say that they saw you on TikTok and that is what influenced them to buy your brand off of a TikTok ad or off of an organic TikTok post, then it has some credence, right? It must have some credence no matter what the other interfaces and what the other numbers say, right? So that's something that we give some weight to. Another one that we use is called DataBox. DataBox is a custom dashboard solution, and we have really hacked this thing up. Like, we are getting real-time visibility in the stats that are very difficult to get in other ways. So for example, for all of our client sites, we know how many people add to cart on a daily basis, and we track that every day. So if we know that there's a sudden drop in that, maybe something's broken with that cart page and we need to be on it right away, right? We also track the amount of searches that people are doing on a client site. because believe it or not, when someone searches within your site, your conversion rate could be quadrupled, right? That's why when you go to Amazon.com, what is the biggest thing that's in your face? It's a search bar. It's a search bar because it gets the customer to the product as soon as possible. So we track that as well. And we want to make sure, we kind of maintain that day trader mentality. Like we know exactly when a number drops or when a number rises, and we need to quickly figure out why that is and what we can do to take advantage of it.
Are there certain platforms you recommend? I know there's a million out there, from Shopify to WooCommerce to whatever. What do you like?
Shopify. Shopify is by far the most value-packed, powerful, user-friendly, and stable platform out there. There's nothing that really comes close.
Yep. We talked about the evolution of kind of hiring for you, and I know that you've spent a lot of time, and that's something you're really thinking about, is hiring for the best talent, and revamping the recruiting process.
Yes.
What have you done to revamp the recruiting process?
Well, I think number one of the most important things is we need to figure out the right questions to ask someone in their interview process, right? And it's far less focus on your actual skills and far more focus on your potential, your background, and your personality, right? So one of the biggest things that we ask for is, hey, let's swap roles. Pretend that you're the hiring manager and I'm not the hiring manager. I'm the applicant for this role that you're applying to. What are the top 3 things that you look for in order for you to make a good X, right? Where X is a job title, operations manager, media buyer, whatever the case might be. And then you just listen. You see what 3 traits that they think is most important for that role. And then you see if it matches, your company culture and what you need in order for them to come on the team and succeed, right? So they may say something like, oh, you need to be heavy attention to detail. You need to work hard and you need to learn quickly. Let's say they say something like that, right? And then you go, okay, well, why don't you give me one story each from your career that highlights each of these main points, and then have them talk through. And the best applicants will immediately bring up 3 scenarios where they're exhibiting these traits, and hopefully they're backed with numbers, backed with data. It fits the type of persona that you're looking for at your company. And that starts to separate this individual from the rest of the pack, right? Because the skills we can teach, but the intrinsic motivation and the personality, we're looking for certain fits that would mesh well with our team. So we have a lot of situational questions that are centered around things like that. And we also like to ask, what is your 5-year plan? And what is your 50-year plan, right? And we don't really care what the answer is, but what we do want to hear is that you have a structured answer, you're a clear communicator, you have thought long-term at some point about your life or your career, because we're looking for, at least for us, we're definitely looking for long-term thinkers. We don't want you to just hit the month, we want you to hit the year.
What have people said about their 50-year plan?
Oh, I've heard all sorts of things. Some people want to go fishing, fishing 24/7 in 50 years. Some people want to run a Fortune 100 company. Some people want to be teachers, actually. They want to go and progress their career at a certain point, and once they get to a certain point, they would like to teach full-time. So yeah, we've heard all sorts of answers.
It's interesting because I was on a call with I think around 15 agencies the other day, and this question came up about their hiring, and they go, how do I determine longevity from the hiring process? Like, obviously I want this person to stay with us for many years. What have you done? Are there any questions? And maybe that's one of the questions that can help determine, this person is going to be with us for a while.
That's a great question. I think there's a 2-part answer, right? The first part is that if you're hiring well and the pieces are fitting, it fits that person's career trajectory, it fits their personal situation, and you as an organization is able to offer a great landing page, a landing spot for their career, then you've done half of the legwork, right? The fit at the beginning is about half of the legwork. The rest of it, the longevity, is a ongoing nurturing process that never stops, right? So are your individuals, once they come in, do they have a clear plan for growth that's trackable in a platform where there's checkboxes that they can see that are being ticked off? Are you having regular, ideally weekly conversations about how their career is going and how their performance is like? Are you constantly challenging them and allowing them space to experiment and fail with grace, right? I think if you have the right type of team members on board, then you're creating an environment where they're able to grow, stretch, fail, learn, then the longevity will come. But you constantly have to earn it, right? Very much like a marriage, right? You constantly have to earn, upgrade, level up, and you never really stop. So I think that helps. That's the other half of the equation.
Edwin, love that. Thanks for sharing that. The other thing that you are thinking a lot about and continually evolving and improving is how you run finances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In 2022 and 2023, we completely revamped the finances for our agency. We've cleaned up all of our books, and we've implemented systems that allowed us to really tremendously increase our margins, right? I think the first thing was that, number one, we built custom dashboards. We know exactly how the month will end, why it'll end at those metrics, for what reason, and then we could start pulling the levers, right? And for an agency, the levers are really your team members' time, right? So we built a system where it was relatively painless for our team members to enter in on a weekly basis what they're spending their time on. We have a little piece of software in the back end that's categorizing these things and building them into charts. And then we meet with senior leadership every 2 weeks to discuss how these things are going. If we're spending too much time on a certain type of task, why is that, right? Then we really dig in. Is there automation or AI that can be implemented that would cut this in half? Do we have the wrong people in the wrong seats? Do we have the right people in the wrong seats? Is there someone who's 5 times faster at this versus another individual? Is there a lack of in-house training that we can do to make up that gap? So consistently asking the right questions and then answering those questions allowed us to really increase the efficiency of our agency, because people are producing better quality work with less time invested. And then what happens is that as people become more proficient at what they're doing, because you're putting them in the right seats, they become less stressed. And once they're less stressed, they produce better quality work. And the better quality work speaks for itself, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. So all of that manifested and came to life in 23, and the amount of fiscal reporting and fiscal analytics that we have is light years ahead of where we were.
It sounds like, Edwin, you use DataBox for your clients. Do you also use that same internal of what you're talking about to build a dashboard for these things?
Yes. We track internal agency health metrics on a monthly basis, and we're trying to move it to every mid-month. We'll know how the P&L will look and where deficiencies or gains are coming from.
I know you're, with that type of thing, you're pulling data from different sources. I'd love to talk about techstack for a second. You mentioned time. I don't know if there's like a time tracking tool you like and other tools that you like to utilize. Yeah,
we have a project management software called ClickUp. So ClickUp not only helps organize projects and has a functionality of project management tools, but it also has a time tracking tool, and it has an API. So that anything that has an API, as soon as we get a free second, we love to hop in there and start messing around, start pulling data. So we aggregate it into a in-house small database, if you will, and then we figure out how to visualize it. So that is really kind of the hub of it. We also build a lot of custom Slack bots. So Slack, we use Slack a lot internally, and we have these commands where someone can, fill out a form or check out the performance of their account, or they get alerts if something looks funky. They get that in Slack, and these are all ways that we can help save time for individuals. So we notice that individuals are spending a lot of time doing mundane or rote tasks. Then we're quick to build or get a solution that helps free up their time, so they have more headspace to think about the important things, so the more strategic things.
Yeah, we love ClickUp too. We use Asana for many years, but ClickUp has a lot of amazing functionality. So I totally agree. What about from like an SOP's perspective? Are you just using ClickUp, or do you have a separate platform for SOPs?
So we tried a lot of different systems. We tried Google Doc. We tried building internal wikis, and what we kind of came back to was ClickUp, right? Ideally, we want one platform to rule them all, because we don't want team members to have to learn 7 different platforms and wrangle 7 different sets of data in 7 different areas, right? So we're all centralizing ClickUp right now.
Any other important tools that you like?
I love 15.5. 15.5. So 15.5 is a employment engagement tool. So it has pretty much everything, right? So it tracks all of our one-on-one agendas with our team members. So there's a place to see everything that was discussed and what has been actioned since the last one-on-one. We are centralizing all of our employee reviews there and all of their growth plans, like we said. So we're moving it from one platform, centralizing this one. We also have something called a check-in. So people are rating themselves on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 means I feel amazing. The week has been fantastic. This was one of the worst weeks ever. So it allows us to keep track of burnout or situations before they become, too gnarly, right? And then last but not least, we have a functionality in there called a high 5, right? So if a team member is really exhibiting one of our cultural pillars and they're doing a great job helping others, right? Then you can give them a high 5, and then we have a little bot that basically takes that high 5 and we'll put it in Slack, and then everyone will see it, right? So you see people high-fiving each other all day as they continue to, grow and produce results and follow our cultural pillars.
Edwin, what are some groups or maybe even mentors that have been instrumental in your growth? Because it seems like, the way you think about teams and all these things is pretty sophisticated. I'm wondering who's helped you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people. I would say that immediately right away, back when I was in-house at my last opportunity, the CEO of that company, tremendous in my career, just really brought me up from a boy really to be a man in the business world, right? The former COO of that company, extremely instrumental, taught a lot about leadership and operations, both of which I was sorely lacking. And then the former CMO of that company as well, like in terms of marketing, analytics, how to structure data, how to clean data, and how to grab insights, tremendously influential. I mean, those 3 individuals immediately top of mind have been tremendous. I also have some groups that I'm in. I have a group called the 5-Star Group, and really the leader of that group, Steve, has been incredibly instrumental in terms of operations and how to treat people with respect. And that sounds like a simple term, but it has a lot of complexity to it that I think I'm still mastering to this day, right? So I think all of those individuals tremendously influential. I wouldn't be here without them.
What you mentioned leadership at the previous company with the CEO, COO. Is there an example you can give of something maybe they did or said that helped you that you take to Jetfuel?
Yeah, I think one very important thing is that you want to try to avoid parachuting, right? Because of my position and my experience, you have a habit, or I had a habit of parachuting into a situation, throwing everything awry, and then parachuting back out, right? Which, obviously, as someone who is who is highly driven, that is my natural instinct, right? I see a problem, like as soon as I see a problem, I jump in there, try to fix as many things as I can, and I jump off to the next problem, right? But one thing that they told me was that, well, if you're doing that, you're actually hamstringing your team. You have never allowed them to fall flat on their face, because sometimes falling flat on your face is the best teacher. It's like that with your kids, right? Like when
That's
you're
immediately what I
constantly
thought of when you said that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I have two kids, so I think about this quite deeply. There's instances where you can set them up for success, but they'll probably learn more if they fail. They'll build the muscle memory to get off the mat when they get knocked down, and then everyone needs to build that muscle, right? So I think that's something that I really had to restrain myself, is that I actually see problems happen in slow motion and I let them happen, and I sit back and I see how the team would deal with it, right? And sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't, right? That's life. But the times where it didn't work out, I was tremendously surprised at how much they learned from that. And they would learn more from that than me observing my behavior, or by me making sure that problem never happened in the first place. And that, I think, is key. Like that drove more growth in the long term than me parachuting in and fixing everything for everyone.
Do you remember one of those situations where you actually became self-aware? Like there were times when you would parachute in, you didn't even realize that you were parachuting in. There's times after now that you're like, I'm not touching this, I'll let them handle it. Was there a moment that you remembered, like a situation you could talk about where you came in and you were kind of aware of parachuting, and and then you went back and you're like, oh God, I shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
And what was happening? Like what was actually the situation?
Yeah. Let me think.
Because I can totally relate to what you're saying here, right? It's like you see it unfolding and you're like, I could see if it goes this way, it's not going to be good.
Right.
If it goes this way, it's going to be great. So talk about one of those times where you actually were self-aware and you parachuted in, and after the fact, you were like, oh.
Yes.
Shouldn't have done it.
I'm struggling to just pick one, right? I think one that really stands out is we were all working on a project. There was many individuals involved. I think it must be at least 8 individuals. And this is a project that's client facing, right? So it was a big presentation that we had to present. There was a lot of storylines that had to be wrangled. And I know that I was looking at the deck, right? And I was looking at the drafts of the deck, and I was just going, okay, this is not it. Like this is not at the level of quality. This is not nowhere close, right? So I went in there and I must have left like 50 comments, like red lines everywhere, right? To like 8 different people. So I was like, I was like a flurry of activity. So I did all that. Okay. So obviously, if the CEO does that, human nature is that everyone drops what they're doing and they immediately start fixing it, right? And the thing is, right, I do a lot of postmortems. So I did a postmortem with the head of media, and he was saying, what you did was terrible, right? It was terrible. Everyone's sweating bullets. They don't even know why you made the comments. They just know they have to do it. So he told me, I guarantee you the next project that is, because we're going to do several of these. So the next project, you're going to do the same thing. Same exact scenario is going to happen, because they never learned how, like, why and how you're making those comments, right? And then they've never had the feeling of presenting something that was subpar, because you've always came in and fixed everything before, right? So you were sort of the helicopter parent, making, propping up the kid and make sure they don't fail at the recital. But sometimes they have to not do well at the recital. Sometimes they have to not do well at the recital, because then when that happened, you can see it click. They're like, I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to feel that uncomfortable again. And then the next iteration of that work, I was a lot less involved, but the quality was much better.
Yeah. Maybe your next leadership book is going to be called, Edwin, avoid parachuting or something
Yeah,
like that.
avoid
Love
parachuting.
that. I love it. I love that. I'm always fascinated how people get clients. Like you've had some amazing brands that you've worked with. I don't know
Mhm.
which would be a better example to talk about how Chomps heard about you or
Yeah,
Tate's Bake Shop heard about you.
yeah.
What would be the best thing to talk about?
Well, I have a very unsexy answer to that. And the answer to that is if you do tremendous work that proves itself out, then the word of mouth is very powerful, right? Because if you talk about Chomps, that was a referral from former Perfect Snacks members. If you talk about Tate's, that was the a portfolio company of the same company that acquired Perfect Snacks. So they have observed the growth. They have observed how we run things. So that's what I will always tell the team is that yes, it's not to say we shouldn't do these other things, right? Which we certainly are and will continue to do, but it all starts and ends with performance. Like if you perform and the bar quality is this high and you're constantly hitting that bar, exceeding it, everything else will fall in line because we will be seen as a solution to a problem that's tricky to solve and it's hard to trust agencies, especially nowadays. That's number one. Number two, when we started out, we've had a lot of relationships with venture capital firms, right? Where we're doing due diligence projects. And that really kind of came from our DNA of being extremely data oriented and also telling the truth respectfully, if that makes sense, at all times. And those are things that a lot of venture capital firms look for. And I think that has opened a lot of doors because obviously they are talking to a ton of direct consumer brands and they know of a lot of people. So that continues to be something that we lean upon to this day.
You know, first of all, Edwin, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your lessons. I want to encourage everyone to check out jetfuel.agency to learn more. And last question is just about some of your favorite resources. Those could be books, they could be, speakers, who you follow. Who are some of your favorite, or what books are some of your favorite resources over the years for business?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one book that comes to mind is a book called Traction. That is, if you only read one book, that's the book that I would read because it quite literally it lays out the entire operating system for running a business and running an organization very well. So first and foremost, that's number one. Speakers, I have to tell you, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. I'm a big Tony Robbins disciple. And I think one of the most important things that I derived from his speeches is what meaning do you choose to derive from what's happening to you right now? Because that's something you can control. Good is something that's happening to you. Do you determine it as a good thing that's happening to you? Or do you determine that as a bad thing? That's entirely within your control. You can almost make anything a good thing if you see it through. So I think that has been tremendously helpful just because as a business owner and as a leader, I could certainly tell you very few days you wake up and it happens exactly the way you wanted it to. you could probably count those on both hands, right? Those days. So I think those keeping yourself mentally strong, mentally stable through kind of thought exercises like that, I think is a service to your clients and a service to your team and a service to yourself as well.
Love it. Yeah, I want to echo that. I had Gino Wickman on the podcast who authored Traction, so check that episode out. Also, Rocket Fuel, I had Mark Winters on. He co-authored Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman. That's another good episode. Yeah. And Tony Robbins, I love. I listen to his tape cassettes. For those of you who are younger, there's these like things that you stick. I don't even want to explain it, but tape cassettes in my car of Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. I had Personal Power 1, Personal Power 2, which was like, who knows, 20 different DVDs
classics.
or DVD CDs or whatever. So love those suggestions, Edwin, and just want to encourage everyone to check out jetfuel.agency, and we'll see everyone next time. Edwin, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.